The first time Ira Aldridge stepped into a theater, he knew where he was meant to be. He watched the actors on stage in front of him. At that moment, he decided he would be an actor. The path to the stage would be a difficult one. Ira Aldridge grew up in New York City during the 1800s. As a black man, Aldridge battled against prejudice. Although he was born of free status, slavery was still legal in the United States. Black actors could not be hired by white companies. One of the only places Aldridge could perform was the New York African Grove Theater. This black-owned theater was attacked by riots and mobs of angry protesters. Aldridge's father, Daniel, had other plans for his son. Daniel wanted Ira to follow in his footsteps and become a preacher. This would be a much easier career than acting, but Ira Aldridge could not shake the feeling he had the first time he was in the theater. He needed to go someplace with more opportunities for people of color. When he was just 17 years old, Aldridge made the biggest decision of his life. He left his family and friends in America and stepped aboard a ship headed for England. This would be the beginning of his long career as one of Europe's most famous actors. This is the story of Ira Aldridge.
Hi, young historians. Welcome to another episode of Anytime Now. I'm Brooke, co-founder of Honest History. In this episode, we're celebrating Black History Month and learning about an amazing person most of you have probably never heard of. We're going to take the stage with an amazing actor who broke barriers with his incredible performances and personality. Do you have a dream to accomplish something big when you grow up? It could be anything, from going to Mars to discovering the next great archaeological artifact. Now, imagine a bunch of people telling you you could never accomplish this goal just because of the way you looked. You'd probably be upset and maybe want to prove them wrong. I know I would. The person in this episode experienced that very same thing. He had a dream of becoming an incredible actor long before movies were around. But many people wouldn't hire him just because of the way he looked. As you listen to this episode, remember that big goal you'd like to accomplish someday, and ask yourself, would you be willing to risk it all to travel across the world to accomplish this goal? Many of us might say no, and that's fine too. But the person we're about to learn about decided he was willing to give up his life in America to travel to an unknown place to make his dreams come true. That takes a ton of courage and bravery. So let's travel back in time and learn about Ira Aldridge and his incredible story.
It was March 29th, 1833. Ira Aldridge stood on a stage inside the Theatre Royal in Edinburgh, Scotland. The audience applauded and waved their handkerchiefs in the air. It had now been over 8 years since Aldridge moved to Britain. Since then, he had learned how to speak in a British accent. He could perform both comedy and drama. He had acted in more than 40 plays, in over 50 towns, with over 600 different actors. Now, at the age of 25, he had an exciting announcement to make. The audience grew quiet as Aldridge raised his hand to speak. He thanked them for their kindness. Although he had enjoyed his time in Scotland, he could not stay. "I'm going to London tomorrow," he said, "to perform at the Theatre Royal, Covent Garden." The Theatre Royal was one of the most famous theatres in London. Aldridge had been asked to perform unexpectedly. A few weeks earlier, the famous actor Edmund Kean had been performing Shakespeare's Othello at Covent Garden. In the middle of the third act, Kean spoke the famous line,
Farewell! Othello's occupation's gone.
Then, Kean collapsed. He was quickly carried off the stage. The theater manager, Pierre Laporte, wrote to Aldridge. He asked Aldridge to take Kean's place. Aldridge immediately agreed. He would be performing Othello for 3 nights in London. Othello was one of Shakespeare's famous tragedies. The main character, Othello, was a Moorish general in Venice, Italy. During Shakespeare's time, the word Moor was used to describe a person who was Muslim, Arab, or North African. At that time, white actors played the part of Othello. Because Othello was a Moor, these white actors used makeup to darken their skin. Aldridge had been the first actor of color to play Othello in Britain. Now, he had the chance to perform Othello on one of the biggest stages in London. This could make or break his career. On March 30th, 1833, Aldridge began the long journey from Edinburgh to London. Opening night was just 11 days away. Pierre Laporte, the theater manager, was excited to start advertising the new show. 2 days before opening night, he placed an announcement in the newspaper.
This Wednesday, April 10th, 1833, will be performed Shakespeare's tragedy of Othello. Othello by Mr. Aldridge, a native of Senegal, known by the appellation of the African Roscius.
Roscius was the name of a great actor from ancient Rome. Years ago, a reviewer had called Aldridge the African Roscius. It quickly became his trademark. Aldridge began to say that he was from Africa and his family was Senegal royalty. He realized that more people wanted to see an actor from Africa rather than an actor from New York City. After Pierre Laporte placed the announcement in the paper, news of Aldridge spread. It would be the first time a black actor played the role of Othello at the Theatre Royal. One newspaper criticized the announcement. The writer said that Aldridge's skin was too dark to play Othello. He wanted Aldridge removed from the play. Aldridge's friends in London responded to the news article.
Fellow countrymen,
They wrote,
do not permit a worthy and talented man to be crushed by the slanders and lies of these newspapers.
Aldridge's friends printed their responses and handed it out to the people near Covent Garden. Aldridge expected this kind of press. As a black actor, he was at the center of a heated debate. At that time, people were campaigning to end slavery across the British Empire. The slave trade to Britain had been abolished, but slavery still existed in Britain's colonies. Over 70,000 people remained enslaved in the West Indies. Those who wanted to end slavery supported Aldridge. Those who wanted slavery to continue did not want to see Aldridge succeed. It was April 10th, the day of his first performance in Covent Garden. Aldridge made his way towards the Theatre Royal. The streets were busy with activity. He could hear the roll of the carriage wheels and the clip-clop of horse hoofs on the cobblestone streets. It wasn't long before he reached the theater. He gazed up at the large white building before him. At the front, there were 4 big columns and steps leading to the entrance doors. As a performer, Aldridge would use another entrance on Hart Street. He opened the smaller door, took off his top hat, and walked up the stone staircase to the stage. Later that day, the audience began arriving at the theater. Aldridge peeked out from behind the curtain. There were a lot of empty seats. Why hadn't people come? Was it because of the newspaper article? Aldridge knew that there could be another reason. The flu had spread across London these past few weeks. Many people were at home sick. It was almost time to begin. The audience grew quiet just before the curtain opened. Aldridge was standing off the stage, waiting. He would not enter until the second scene. At the beginning of the next scene, Aldridge walked on stage dressed as Othello. He was wearing a cap, earrings, and a long velvet cloak. The audience waited for Aldridge's first line. "'Tis better as it is," he said in his clear, deep voice. The audience watched as Aldridge moved across the stage. Sometimes he spoke loudly and energetically. Other times he whispered. The final scene of the play was Othello's death. This was an important scene for every actor. He raised his dagger and pretended to stab himself. With his back facing the audience, he fell backwards fearlessly. The curtain fell and the audience clapped and roared. They begged Aldridge to return to the stage. Aldridge came out from behind the curtain and thanked the audience for their kindness. This was the type of reaction every actor hoped for. Over the next couple of days, newspapers began to print their reviews.
On Wednesday, a real black Othello in the person of Mr. Aldridge made his debut,
wrote one reviewer.
Some of our fellow writers have blamed the manager for allowing him to appear. We must differ with them in opinion.
Another reviewer wrote about Aldridge's voice.
It falls on the ear with a melancholy sweetness.
Most of the reviewers stated that Aldridge had great promise as an actor, but there were still those who did not want to see a black actor on stage. Some newspapers criticized the way Aldridge spoke and looked. One reviewer began digging into Aldridge's past.
Looking at his birth, parentage, and education, nothing short of inspiration could possibly make him fit for Shakespeare's Othello,
the reviewer wrote. As Aldridge read this review, he tried to not let it upset him. He knew some critics were determined to dislike him because of his skin color. Still, he was angry that the newspapers were spreading lies about him. I never was a servant of any man, Aldridge said. This writer presumes that because I am a man of color, I must have been a servant and slave, and because of this, I should not have been allowed in the Theatre Royal. Even if he had been a servant or a slave, why should he be banned from acting? There have been slaves who had freed themselves and ruled over kingdoms, Aldridge thought. Aldridge was scheduled to perform Othello 2 more times, but after his second performance, Laporte received bad news. 24 performers were sick with the flu. Laporte canceled Aldridge's final performance. Newspaper articles continued to write about Aldridge. They debated over why the performance was canceled. Was it because of the negative reviews? Was it because of the flu? The theater managers began to worry. What if people read the negative reviews? What if people did not buy tickets to see Aldridge? Managers did not want to take the risk. 10 weeks later, Aldridge was no longer able to find steady work in London. For the next 15 years, Aldridge traveled around England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, staying far away from London. Though he was able to return in 1848, Aldridge felt stuck. He realized that he had gone as far as he could in Britain. That's when he had an idea. He would make an acting company of his own and travel the continent. Aldridge had many friends and fellow actors he could ask to join him. The London newspaper announced the news.
Mr. Ira Aldridge, the African Roscius, is making up a company.
Aldridge and his actors boarded a ship to make the short journey to France. For the next 3 years, Aldridge toured Europe. There, he finally found the fame he deserved. He sold out shows, received awards, and was called the hero of Shakespeare.
Hip hip hooray!
In Germany, the royal family came to watch Aldridge perform. At the end of the performance, His Majesty, the King, sent for me, Aldridge wrote. I had the high honor to receive a large and massive gold medal. I am the only actor to receive this. Aldridge felt free to perform other roles that were usually played by white actors. In Europe, he starred in a Shakespeare's play, The Merchant of Venice, Richard III, and Macbeth. The audience was amazed by Aldridge's acting. Even people who did not speak English could follow his movements and expressions. Aldridge knew that his acting was doing more than just selling tickets. Every time he got up on stage, he had the power to change minds. He used the stage to speak out against slavery and injustice. There was one evening Aldridge would never forget. He was performing in the Netherlands. He finished his 3rd performance of Othello. The audience clapped and sang out their support. Aldridge was overwhelmed by the applause. He returned to the stage to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, the very high and distinguished honor you have this evening given me. It is utterly impossible for me to find words to express my feelings. Aldridge then began to thank his audience, not only for their kindness to him, but also for their work to end slavery in Dutch colonies. I need only refer to the noble work in progress among you, the emancipation of my fellow countrymen in your colonies. Aldridge continued to say that freedom was the right of every man. I once more thank you from the bottom of my heart. He ended his speech. Aldridge continued to perform until his death in 1867 at the age of 60. Although he never returned to the United States, news of Aldridge made it to America. His career became an inspiration for African American actors. Despite his fame, Ira Aldridge was often missing from history books, but this has already started to change. Today, you can find several books and plays about his incredible life. And if you ever travel to the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre in England, you can find a plaque with his name on it. He's the only black actor to have a memorial plaque in this theater. Someday soon, I hope, everyone will know the name Ira Aldridge.
Welcome back from our journey through time. Othello has always been one of my favorite Shakespeare plays, and it was from studying this play years ago that I first learned about Ira Aldridge. There is so much we can take away from his story. The first lesson is how one person can make a significant impact on history just by showing up and doing the thing they were meant to do. So often, especially as adults, we talk ourselves out of our wildest dreams, and Ira Aldridge is an example of why living to our fullest potential matters. The second lesson we can learn from Ira is to never let other people's prejudices get in your way. Each and every one of us is alive today to make a difference, and we should never let other people's opinions stand in the way of our greatness. I hope you feel as inspired as I do after hearing about Ira's story. Who knows? Maybe in 50 years, we will be reading your name in the newspaper and how you made the world a better place by following your dreams. That's all we have for now, but there is plenty of honest history available if you are itching for more. You can read all about Ira Aldridge and Shakespeare in issue 9 of our magazine, An Era of Exploration. You can also learn about the great scientists, artists, and thinkers who made a difference and helped shape the modern world. See you all on our next adventure. This episode was hosted by Shain Brenden and written by Heidi Coburn. Production was led by Randall Lawrence. To learn more about this episode, including more about the host, visit us at honesthistorymag.com and follow along for updates on social media at Honest History.